We want to thank each one of you for helping this channel. In this video, I want to highlight some of the most interesting comments in our previous videos. Comments that raise interesting points, agreed, disagreed with us, or have enriched the discussion of the topics we were talking about. Jacob Geller commented on oppression in video games. Lovely video. I'm gonna type a rather long response here, but first off, I want to say I really enjoyed it. I think the issue that Infinite runs into, which is slightly different than the examples you used, is it directly parallels itself with American slavery. Columbia's reverence for the founding fathers, their mirroring of the US propaganda, the constant use of the flag, much of the game is supposed to read as a critique of American patriotism. And so when viewing the Vox Populi through the lens of a slave uprising, which I believe is the most direct analogue, the context of oppressed becoming oppressor is less clear. The game's writers are on your side, I believe. They don't want us to think that the Vox is bad, per se, but they do want us to believe that they've been warped by trauma. Booker's somewhat infamous line, when it comes down to it, the only difference between Comstock and Fitzroy is how you spell the name, is a direct reference to the writer's implication that there is no good side here. However, this is a pretty tone-deaf message when American slavery is a clear target. Slave uprisings, though often violent, never changed the fundamental power dynamics of white supremacy. More so, given how a quieter form of racism has continued into the present day, Infinite's message of moderation in the face of oppression seems patronizing to those actually suffering from it. The Last of Us is a great example of a deeply flawed protagonist making understandable decisions. I think there are a couple of differences between Infinite and The Last of Us. One, we're never really supposed to dissociate from Booker. He's a sympathetic lead throughout, meaning when he says things like what I mentioned above, we're probably supposed to agree with him. Joel is much more complex and does many things that we, the player, are likely supposed to find questionable. This makes his selfishness play better as a character beat. I also think you might want to examine how you're defining oppression versus something like individual trauma. Joel has endured an immense amount of trauma, but the kind of oppression in Infinite, one that's institutional and enforced by larger structures of supremacy, isn't really present in The Last of Us. Joel's decisions as an individual are totally understandable, but since Infinite's revolution is supposed to be a shorthand for a whole cast of people revolting, the game's condemnation of the actions seems more judgmental of social movements as a whole. Sorry to type so much here, this is a subject I'm super passionate about, and I'm happy to find other people who feel the same way. Please continue to make more thoughtful videos. Jacob, that is a great comment and makes us feel really glad that we're making these videos. Okay, let's discuss the points you're raising. I know that the game has some parallels to modern day issues like Black Lives Matter, police brutality, and income inequality. Actually, in our first draft of the video we put in some footage referring to these issues, but then decided to remove it and replace it with World War II and older footage to avoid any controversy. These topics are still hotly debated, and by focusing on them, we thought they might distract the viewer from our main points. I concede to most of the points you're raising except for one. Infinite's message of moderation in the face of oppression seems patronizing to those actually suffering from it. My thought when I read this idea from you was, if the events of the game were presented in any other way, I think it would have been disappointing and unfaithful to history. On the point about The Last of Us, yes, I think it did a better job at presenting a controversial character and controversial decisions. Actually, the scene of killing the doctors is left for the player to do those actions, and the player can avoid killing some of the doctors if they wish to. If I may rephrase your last point in a question, it would be, can we categorize nature and environments as oppressors? After reading Cormac McCarthy's book The Road, my answer is yes. A trauma might happen to you in a short period and have a lasting impact. Oppression, on the other hand, is part of your daily life and struggle. The Road shows how these events can transform an average, peaceful person into a monster willing to go the extra mile to survive. Steve Wilson commented on what video games can learn from eroticism. I've been using YouTube for years but have never commented on a single video until now. I've worked as a video producer in the games industry for nearly a decade, and this instantly caught my attention above all the noise. Beautifully edited, stunning production, and an eloquent and educational point to the whole video. Really impressed and quite frankly inspired. Keep it up, you have talent. Steve, you don't know how encouraged we are because of your comment. People think that money is all there is to this work, but emotional support is much more valuable than anything else. If this was your first time commenting on a YouTube video, then it's a big honour for us, and be assured, Steve, that we will keep up the hard work and give it 110%. Samuel Olsen commented on, "Can video games rewrite history?" I'm a little late to the party, but I've just discovered your channel. Firstly, I love your videos and hope that you'll continue them as they're immensely interesting. Secondly, I have some problems with how you characterized mainstream historical work into the general category of linear history. There are linear histories, quite a lot of them, but many of the histories that I have read, including textbooks, include many details of daily life and normal people. I am not an expert on the subject, but I am a senior in college for a history degree, so I've read a fair amount of history texts and textbooks. Many of my classes have depictions of regular living, such as The Cheese and the Worms by Carlo Ginzburg and Inside Hitler's Germany by Sachs and Kunst. Both of these books, one a historical account of a miller in the 16th century and the other an account of Hitler's rise to power and regime, have much to say about the common living. The Ginzburg account is about a miller who is a bit irregular, but not any famous historical figure, and the textbook has several chapters and many documents that detail what kind of world Hitler was living in. They didn't ignore non-linear history as you seem to suggest textual histories do. I don't disagree that games are an amazing idea for the sort of world building that you're advocating for. I'm actually a big fan of the ideas you suggested at the end of the video. There are many amazing ways that games can, and should, help further our understanding and consumption of history. I just felt as though the situation wasn't quite as dire as the one you laid out in your video. I hope this wasn't too intimidating or accusatory. I really enjoyed the video and the conclusions that you arrived at. Hey Samuel, thanks for the thoughtful comment. As you see it, a fair amount of books pick linear history as a method to explain past events. Sure, not all of them are like that. I just finished a couple of weeks ago reading Max Hastings' excellent book on World War II, All Hell Let Loose, and in it, he puts a lot of emphasis on the lives and emotions of normal soldiers, and not just on the politicians and generals. But even 800 pages was not enough. He was able to devote a page or less for what each soldier had to say. Is it the author's mistake? No, but the medium is not allowing him to go any further. Otherwise, he would end up writing a 3,000-page book. For comparison, a game like Baldur's Gate 2 contains more than 1 million words. Well, that's more than all the Harry Potter books combined. The medium is very flexible to add more dialogue and experiences. The other thing is that I think many famous historians are mixing correlation with causality. I don't blame them, they're not statisticians and are not familiar with mathematical probabilities, but time after time I see them mentioning two events with some correlation between them being presented as a sequence of cause and effect. Walter Isaacson, Ian Kershaw, Bernard Lewis, and Toby Judd. I like these authors and I enjoy reading their books, but I can't help noticing that this is what they do. Gaming Mechanoid commented on oppression in video games. I had a problem with your use of infinite in one of the previous videos. I hoped I wouldn't see it again, but hey, can't fault you for what you like. To me, infinite is one of the biggest gaming blunders ever. Let's start with the violence. Most of it, 90%, is never justified. The game wants to be important and have something meaningful to say, but it ends up being corridor shooting, hook face mashing, and after 20 to 30 minutes of that nonsense, we get an emotional scene between Booker and Elizabeth. Not to mention that characters in this utopia don't have a reason to be this bloodthirsty, considering they hold all the cards. But one newcomer kills 2 cops, and the entire city is after him? Sorry, that's just too absurd. All of that can be forgiven if it had any thematic weight, though, and sadly, it doesn't. The most tragic of all, however, is that it repeats the mistakes of the first Bioshock. It thinks that just because it talks about objectivism/slavery, it criticizes it, when in fact mechanically it supports the idea of that which it is criticizing. Not to mention that it comments about institutionalized racism, the same way that Bright and Crash did, trying to portray racism as a logical, emotional human flaw, while completely ignoring the root causes and how systems influenced such behavior for personal gain. Not to mention the weak, centrist view it takes when it portrays the revolutionary leader as someone who took it a step too far. It shows us an African American woman holding a child as a hostage, on the verge of pulling the trigger. That is some really emotional, manipulative BS right there, considering that throughout the game, we don't directly see the biggest evils of Comstock, and are mainly told about them. Oh, but we see coloured bathrooms and people scrubbing floors and cardboard cutouts of racist caricatures, you'd say. Yeah, that doesn't really help. But you know what's the worst of all? None of this matters because the game wants you to see the ending. An ending built on a few neat ideas and a twist that both drop the entire political superficiality anyway. Some other commenters have mentioned that the oppressed become oppressors narrative doesn't really hold any water because it's portraying American racism, and that ended nowhere near the same way as the ideas portrayed in this essay. Not to mention that most historical events don't end with a group of oppressed people rising up to establish a new order. In most cases, broken people have to rebuild what little is left after an enormous conflict. In other cases, there's a power vacuum, and people with the power, means, and agendas take over, and establish themselves as the new oppressors, which go against the ideas put forth here. Look, I don't want this to sound overly aggressive. If you read all the way to this part, I'd just like to apologize for my incoherent writing, and if it seems like I'm being too hard on you, I am not. You make amazing videos with great topics, amazing editing, and stellar narration. I wrote all of this because I care about what you're doing with your channel, and I want to see you succeed. Also, I'd like to add that Bioshock Infinite does have redeeming values, and it's mostly in the art direction part, as you've mentioned before. I still despise the game, and wish you'd used better examples, and there are far better examples for each of the topics you covered, especially in the indie game sphere. But I'm still going to stay subscribed and see where you take your channel. Good luck. Gaming Mechanoid, I'm happy to see comments like yours that oppose my hypothesis in the video. That's why we have the comments section to debate these ideas. So feel free to criticize me and the video. Back to your points. I'll argue that the violence was justified in Infinite. The whole story revolves around, spoiler, someone who is being an experimental rat in the city, and we're playing in what is probably experiment number 100 and something. Comstock, through all these versions, gained more and more knowledge about the outcome and is preparing his people religiously and psychologically for the outcome we see in the version we play. So I don't think people went nuts because the player kills 2 policemen, but because he is the false shepherd Comstock has prepared his people to face. Do I think the game handled the topics of slavery and racism very superficially? Absolutely, I agree with you on that. But that wasn't the topic of the video. Also on the theme of oppression, if you noticed, I used footage of the unreleased parts of the game because they were relatively better than the final version at delivering that message. In the older footage, you see rebels kicking civilians and killing them, and that was absent from the final version. In the final version, as you said, all we saw were some minorities who were, let's say, not treated very well, and were in the lowest class of that society, but the jump to holding a gun to a child's head was not built up to very well. I accept all of that and I fully agree with it. What I'm saying in the video is about a specific criticism that was targeted at the game, that it wasn't right to portray revolutionaries with a noble cause in that way. And we argue in the video that, in light of historical examples, this might be the only right way to portray them. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel that you're partially frustrated because my videos seem to show Bioshock Infinite as an example to follow, without criticizing it and explaining its shortcomings, even as related to the topics that I talk about. Is that right? If that's the case, then I agree, and maybe I should be more critical in my videos. But in my defense, in the first video, I only talk about the aesthetics of the game, and in this one, I'm talking about a very specific scene in the game. I really thank you for the effort that you put into your comment. It really means a lot to us. Comics Theories commented, "Your editing is fantastic. Just thought I'd let you know. I aspire to be as good as you at editing someday." Thank you, Comics Theories, for the nice words. When it comes to video editing, there is no way around it. You have to devote hours and hours of learning and experimenting. Sometimes a plugin could save some time or make things move faster, but I still like to do things by myself because no plugin is perfect. For For example, the scene of Booker opening a door in the video I made about Plato. I had to go frame by frame and add a mask to it, so it's really time consuming, but there's a lot of pleasure in it. So I want to encourage you to do that. A tip that I don't see many video editors talking about is learning Photoshop. Many of the tricks I do in my videos I would not be able to do if not for Photoshop. Well, that's it for this round of viewers' comments. If you want to be featured here, then you know what you need to do. To help this channel, all we need is your subscription. Click the like button and tell your friends about us. See you soon!